to item 3.3, our update on the implementation of Senate Bill 1440, our student transfer bill. Vice Chancellor Michalowski, Vice Chancellor Russell, and Paul, please proceed.
All right, I will start and introduce this item. We're very pleased to be able to report to you further progress in the implementation of SB 1440. Our presentation is brief, but we try to repeat some background for the benefit of new board members who've not previously heard presentations on this topic. Senate Bill 1440 involves 3 divisions within the Chancellor's office to implement it. Student Services has general responsibility for transfer and articulation, and we focus on the transfer process. Academic Affairs is deeply involved because this it involves an actual degree, and issues related to the curriculum and the construction and approval of the degrees belongs in Academic Affairs. And we've had tremendous engagement from Communications in figuring out a plan and a design to brand this degree and get the information out to the public. And I should mention that an integral partner in all of this work has been the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. Senate Bill 1440 by Senator Padilla was unanimously passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, effective for the current academic year. The bill defines an associate degree for transfer that consists of the general education, a common general education curriculum, either what's called IGETC or CSU GE breadth, plus a minimum of 18 units in a major or area of emphasis that comprise a degree in a subject area. For example, there is now an associate degree for transfer in psychology. And so that degree brings with it some specific guarantees for students. On the community college side, the student cannot be required to take any additional courses other than what is defined in the law. And that addresses an historic problem where often colleges added PE requirements that weren't necessary for transfer, but that caused many students to not get the degree because they didn't want to fulfill that requirement. And so if a student has a GPA of at least 2.0 and receives that degree, then they are guaranteed admission somewhere in the CSU system with junior status. They are assured that all 60 units that have comprised this degree are counted towards the baccalaureate degree at State University, and that the student can receive a baccalaureate degree with no more than 60 units of upper division coursework. In addition, the CSU is prohibited from requiring students to repeat courses that are similar to coursework they've already taken and that's included in their community college degree. In order to get this program rolling, I mean, obviously it takes a high degree of collaboration between the community colleges and the CSU system, as well as between the faculty of the community colleges and the faculty of the CSU. So Chancellor Scott and Chancellor Charlie Reed decided to form an implementation and oversight committee. It is co-chaired by Eric Skinner, our Executive Vice Chancellor, and his counterpart from the CSU system. And it includes a community college president, a chief student services and chief instructional administrator, a student, and faculty representatives, as well as a transfer center director from community colleges and admissions person from the CSU. And this group has met virtually monthly since the bill was enacted and has made significant progress in getting this program off the ground. One challenge was to define how priority in the admissions process would be implemented for students with this degree. And so the CSU has agreed that a student with the associate degree for transfer will get a slight bump in their GPA to get into competitive universities or competitive programs, because virtually all of the CSUs have many of their programs impacted meaning they have more applicants than they can possibly accept. And many of the local CSU campuses are considered impacted, so that local students get a higher priority than students from out of area. In both of those scenarios, a student with a degree has a slight advantage over other students in getting into the institution or program. We have recently been working on a process to identify students with the appropriate SB 1440 degree so that CSU can give them that admissions preference, and so that the CSU knows what to do with them when they get to the university. In CSU Mentor is the admissions site for the CSU. They've included information about the SB 1440 degrees, and it's interesting that there is a high degree of interest being expressed by students, because in the application for fall of 2012, almost 10,000 or more than 10,000 students of 92,000 total CSU transfer applicants said that they were pursuing an associate degree for transfer. Now, that does not reflect reality, because I think that students don't even know at this point what that pursuing that degree entails. But the fact that students said they're getting an associate degree for transfer means that there's a high level of interest and that students will want to pursue the pathway. The CSU has gone through those 10,000 applicants and matched them to the degrees approved at their community college for transfer to the CSU. So that list has been whittled down to 2,600 potential recipients of the associate degree for transfer for the fall 12 semester. And the community colleges have agreed that we will advance our process of doing a degree audit for these students. Typically, colleges ask students who are graduating in the spring to apply for their associate degree in the month of March. We have agreed that for the associate degree for transfer students, they will be told to apply for their degree by February 15th, and the community college will notify them by March 15th if they are in fact on track to receive the degree. And then the students can let the CSU campuses know that they in fact will come with the degree, and all of the guarantees that that entails will come into play. We've created a joint website with the CSU for that's built not for the general public, but for our counselors, our administrators, and anyone who wants information about SB 1440. So I would encourage you to use that if you have questions. It's very comprehensive, and we are well on the way to meeting our requirement that these degrees be available to students who were enrolled in the fall term this year. And I'll turn it over to my colleague Barry Russell to talk about our degrees.
Okay, so the process for putting this legislation into action was quite complicated, as you can imagine. The idea was that we would have 112 different colleges developing degrees that would then come to the Chancellor's office for approval. That would then go to all of the 23 CSUs for some sort of review. And how do we set this up? The good thing is that we have some things in place that make this fit together. We have the CID project, which is a course identification project that has been running for some years. That stepped into high gear and also became the basis for identifying courses across the state that were agreed upon of being equal courses. So that helps make the process just a little smoother. The other thing that happened is that we developed a process with the Academic Senate taking the lead on developing a transfer model curriculum for the major areas that are most often used for transfer. So we started, and right now there are 16 of those in place. We'll get to that list in just a second. But in developing that transfer model curriculum, that was then given out to all of the community colleges to use as a guide, so that we had some similarity across the state from all of the community colleges, because the disaster that was awaiting us was if we had 112 different degrees times 23 different CSUs, you do the math, and it could be a train wreck waiting to happen. So we decided to work together to try to come up with some things that help this become more manageable. And then ultimately, these degrees do get developed on the local campuses. Each local campus has a curriculum committee. They have to follow their same process that they do for other program approvals. They have to go to their local boards to be approved, and then they come to the chancellor's office for the final approval, where they actually get a control number to say that this program is a transfer degree. So there are 16 right now, plus some others that have been developed and that are being put through the process. Our goal is to get to 25 or so in this year, and those would cover the major areas. There are a few outside of this process that are being developed, but we really are focusing on the majors where most students transfer. We've used that data as kind of a basis for making some of these selections. And I'm going to you should have a grid like this on your desk. And these degrees, if this is kind of small to read, are listed across the top of that list there. And I do want to echo Vice Chancellor Michalowski's comment that we could not have done this without the involvement of the Academic Senate. They've been a strong player in this process. They've been hosting these faculty development groups that include the CSU faculty as well, who are sitting together identifying what are the common core courses that students need to have to be prepared for transferring to the CSU within all of these disciplines.
Vice Chancellor, just and maybe you haven't got there yet, but currently we have one degree, though, eligible for transfer?
No, there are 16 models out there right now.
Right, but they're not all approved, correct?
They're models. Let me get to the next slide.
Sorry.
So the models were used and developed at the local campuses. Right now, across the state, we have 280, actually, we had one more, 284 degrees for transfer that have been approved across the state. And then we have 53 more that are in development on the campuses. So if you go to your grid, you can pick your favorite campus and look at the types of degrees that they have selected. The ones with the dark blue dots and a little X mean those are approved degrees. They've gone through the whole process. They are approved. They are going into their catalogs for this next, they may be in their catalogs now in their revisions. The ones with the little pink boxes means those have been developed at the campus, and they're in some state either between the campus or between the chancellor's office in discussion about approval. They may have come here and we send it back for a correction, and it's somewhere in between. So potentially another 53 are close on the horizon of being supported. Those 53 have already been to, most likely have already been to the local boards for approval as well. They're just, it's paperwork kind of bouncing back and forth. So just quickly, I wanted to give a big shout out to those campuses that have 5 or more. We have some campuses that are doing great work out there, and the queue is getting longer. Right now, I will say the queue at the chancellor's office is empty as far as new degrees. As soon as they come in, we move them to a high priority, and we review them as quickly as possible to get them out. Right now, we're waiting, and thankfully, we had the Christmas holidays to kind of catch up a little bit, and the schools were out of session. So now, as they come back in, we expect some more to be coming in the system. Unfortunately, there were a small group of campuses that did not make the final cut. And so I wanted to alert you of that we do have some campuses that did not meet the goal of having 2 degrees by the end of the year. The ones marked here with an asterisk means that though their second degree has been to their local board, will be to their local board in January. So it will be coming for final approval sometime in January. So there are 3 more that we can take off the list fairly quickly in January. My staff is working very closely with all of the other campuses. And in some cases, the issues have to deal more with local issues about proper courses for those degrees. Some of them don't have some of the courses that are required for the transfer model curriculum. And so they either have to develop new courses or authorize some courses that are in the system. So we're working with them to get all those details worked out. But hopefully early on in this spring semester, we'll have all of the colleges with the number of degrees that they need to have to be compliant. I did want to point you also to one element on this grid, and it's on the second page. Along the bottom of the page, I wanted to emphasize this is a cooperative process with the CSU system. What happens when the TMC model is developed and established by the faculty, it is then sent to each of the CSU campuses to say, can you complete the degree in 60 more units at the local CSU. So those numbers at the bottom give you some idea. They're having great success in some cases and struggling success in others of achieving that goal. They are still in the process of updating these numbers. They had a deadline at the end of the year as well to get some information to them. So I expect an update and some of these numbers to go up over the next month or so. But here again, it's do the math. If we have 284 degrees, that means 284 degrees where students can get anywhere in the CSU system, and then you multiply that times the number of CSUs that are represented here. It really is not a trickle. It is a wide pathway for students to get from the community colleges to the CSUs, and we only see it becoming a wider pathway in the future. One thing that I wanted to bring up, and we brought this to the Board of Governors previously, we were able to work with the Governor's Office and the CSU system to develop a proposal that went to Complete College America that was funded. It was $1 million that was provided to make this work. Once again, I want to give a shout out to the Academic Senate. Julie Adams and Jane Patton have worked very hard on this project to make sure that we have funds available to have all the meetings and everything put together. So this grant project has been a really great asset for this program. And one of the major portions of this grant project is the element of communications and marketing. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton.
Thank you. As mentioned, some of the funds that we received from the grant are earmarked for marketing, and the first order of business was to brand this program. And we retained an advertising firm to help us with this, and they developed a variety of logos and taglines that we tested on students, parents, and counselors, and this was the selection that was agreed to. A degree for transfer, a degree with a guarantee, with being the tagline that's meant to stop the reader and get the reader to want to learn more about the program. So we've developed that, and we've distributed the logo and tagline to all the community colleges for their use in catalogs. They're free to use it in their own marketing materials, so that is out there right now. And all of our communications will be driving, and marketing will be driving users to a website. This is the go-to website for students who are interested in the degree for transfer program. It's has a URL of a degree with a guarantee.com. Embedded in this website will be a database, much like you have here on this grid, that will allow the user to query the database in many ways to map out a potential transfer strategy based on campus preference or major preference. There'll also be a lot more information about the details of the degree program. And as students successfully transfer to CSU, we're going to have success stories that we'll post on there to help market the program even more. We're also developing collateral material. Here's a sample of some conceptual designs for a mini poster and a tear pad. These will be distributed to school counselors, both at the high school level and the college level. A critical component will also be social media. We have Facebook and Twitter accounts that we can use to cross-promote the program. And next steps, we're developing a year-round marketing calendar. We also have the opportunity to leverage existing campaigns with paid media, radio, online advertising, and we have the opportunity for some pro bono radio spots coming up very soon, and the creation of banner ads and buttons for to place on various websites, both at the state level and the local community college level. So that's what we've been doing with communications and marketing.
Member Baum?
Thank you very much for the briefing. I'm really proud of the work that's been done to date and excited to see the payoff that it will have for students. I have two questions. One is, because we're making a promise to students, a degree with a guarantee. And then I get concerned when I hear about, well, depending on the Cal State's impaction, you know, an impacted campus here or there, what has been the partnership with the Cal States to guarantee that students have access, and that if they go through this process, if I'm in Pasadena and I see a program at San Diego State, and I do my AA degree with transfer, am I going to get into San Diego State? You know, it's how does that work? Because I'm concerned about keeping that promise and delivering on that promise.
The legislation never promised every student that they would get to go where they want to go into the program that they want to go into. That's, you know, when people hear the concept, kind of your assumption is that it will accomplish that, but in fact the legislation could not guarantee that. And as the CSU has been more and more compressed, and you know, the demand for San Diego State, for example, for freshmen and for transfers is enormous, there is a real problem with accommodating that demand. So what we've tried to ensure is that the student with the SB 1440 degree in all cases would have some kind of priority to get into a campus that's very hard to get into, or a program that is heavily impacted. And I think that we have accomplished that. There have been several occasions when Chancellor Scott has had to check in with Chancellor Reed and make sure that their very strong, firm, high-level commitment to this program is communicated to the CSU faculty and administrators. And it's been, you know, I'd like to say this has all been easy. It's not been easy, but we have been making continued progress, and the CSU leadership is committed to working with their faculty to get more colleges, more disciplines on board with accepting our degrees. And you know, so what we've shown you is significant progress in a short amount of time, and we have confidence that we're going to continue to expand that. One dimension that's not really been spelled out for students is how do they exercise their guarantee to go somewhere if they're not competitive for the particular, you know, their first choice CSU or a particular program. And so we've been pressing the CSU Chancellor's Office to be forthcoming with more information about that. I think that that will help because, you know, the student who gets the degree with a 2.0 GPA will have very few choices of where in the CSU system they can go. Unless they are, you know, high-performing students, they are not likely to get into San Diego State in any
But
in
there
any
will be a
program.
place for them somewhere in the system.
There will be a place for them somewhere, and we are, we expect to hear more from the CSU very soon on how they plan to implement that.
And Chancellor Scott, are the CSUs doing some also, what I've heard is, are they doing some enrollment management to try to cap the number of units and moving their students through the system a little bit more? I don't know. Is that the case at,
Well, they have a goal of increasing their graduation rate. And of course, that would mean that they may eventually want to say, let's say it takes 120 units to graduate. They may either put a cap of, say, 150, 160 units on students and say, beyond that, perhaps we'll charge you a higher fee. That's been discussed. It hasn't been enacted. However, I would say that there's a lot of pressure for them to improve their graduation rate, which they fully intend to do. And this particular SB 1440 will make a big step in that direction because now we're going to have a lot of times when our students maybe got to CSU and they found out that maybe they'd taken 70 units but only 50 transferred, then they began their work, and by the time maybe they got to the end, but unfortunately they dropped out before they got to the end. So this is one of the major pieces of legislation, I think, in terms of higher education in the last 10 to 20 years. A lot of people refer to it as historic. The savings for the state of California alone will mean that we will be able to educate 55,000 more community college students and 15,000 more CSU students at the same price. So you see the advantage of what this is. This is really a very wonderful way to save the students time and money and save the state money, frankly, and mean that more students will complete. We're working hard on what we call a student success agenda or a completion agenda, but this is already a step that's been taken, and there's just such tremendous work that's being done by the faculties of both institutions. The Academic Senate in both CSU and in community colleges have worked very tirelessly on this issue. And it's just going to be a wonderful thing to have a system-wide transfer program. We're going to give out more associate degrees in the community college. We're going to have more transfers. Oh yeah, there's still a lot of little things to be ironed out, and maybe they're not little, maybe they're big. And you know, faculty are wonderful people, but somebody thinks, well, they need to take my upper division course, you know, and so forth. So there has to be a lot of give and take, but in the long run, we're going to see something that is good for community colleges, is good for CSU, is good for the state, and is good for students.
my last question, just really quickly, Vice Chancellor Russell, why has it been so hard to get programs adopted for English, history, political science? I look at the list and I say a lot in certain areas, but some that you would think are more core areas haven't been acted on.
Right, it's just a matter of when those transfer model curricula were introduced.
I
The
see.
first three that you see heavily populated were the first three
That
or
was
four.
what we offered
And
as
so
the
the
transfer
others
model
have
curriculum.
come later on,
see.
and we expect to see many more of those over this next spring.
Okay, thank you.
Member Baca, then Vice President Perez, and then Member Ramos.
Member Baum asked one of the questions, and I have another one, and Vice Chancellors Michalowski and Russell, maybe one of you can respond to this. The Senate-
Member Baca, can you push your
Well,
microphone?
I thought it was pushed.
No, there you go.
Am I on?
No.
Am I on now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Can't hear myself. But let's see here. I think one of you maybe can answer this question. The Senate has done a great job of getting information out to the field, as your offices have. I suspect that the interest at the local campus on a very operational level is such that maybe some discipline faculty are very intent on a certain type of degree, and maybe the college the other parts of the college have maybe somewhat different views of that degree as well. And I just kind of wanted the two of you to respond to the interplay that goes on maybe on some campuses with regard to the development of the degree itself, regardless of discipline.
Looking at it from the 30,000-foot view, I would say that most faculty that I've talked to are very supportive of the concept and the idea. It's where it gets developed and where does it go. So many of them, and I think some of the hesitation on building out further degrees on some campuses is basically on, we want to see what happens before we move forward with this. We're going to do our first 2 or 3, we're going to get them in place and see how the rest of this builds out. How does the other shoe drop? And which CSUs respond this way or that way. So there's some of that hesitation, some of that waiting. Our message to them has been, don't wait. It's that if we don't build the degrees, we'll never know. So we have to get the degrees out there and don't wait. So at this point, it really is for the community colleges, and the bill was very clear that it put the community college faculty in the driver's seat of developing the curriculum. The CSUs have to accept the curriculum. So we're in some ways not used to doing that. And so we have to take it on its face value and move forward, build the degrees, and then move forward with having Vice Chancellor Michalowski work out the transfer issues.
And I understand that. My question wasn't so much with the CSU, but just internally within each campus as they're developing the degree. And the discipline faculty, obviously in each of the disciplines, would be the driving force, but there also may be a driving force to inject other parts of it. For example, the PE course that talk about not getting the degrees there. There's maybe some residual still there of that kind of an idea that we will still introduce things maybe that even the discipline faculty is not necessarily interested in, but is driven towards because there's other pressures there. That was more my question.
Yeah, my experience and observation is that there are some controversial pieces, not only PE, but other sorts of graduation requirements that several campuses have put in addition on their associate's degrees are being left out. The other ideas of having curriculum developed at the state level that then comes down for implementation at the local level, that there maybe is some divisiveness about with certain courses being included. But what I'm seeing is, over time, is that people are accepting the facts. They are working together, and a lot of that is being mitigated at the local level through discussion. So it's been kind of a slow but fast process that has moved us to where we are now. I really, truly believe over the next 6 months, we're going to have great progress in more adoption because I think a lot of that conversation has happened and people are kind of getting past those first little bitty problems that came up.
Vice President Perez.
First of all, I just want to give a special recognition to American River College for being the leader in having 8 degrees approved. I think that's exceptional leadership. But Vice Chancellor Michalowski, can you please help clarify for me, was it 10,000 students that have applied, and of the 10,000, 2,600 are being considered?
There were, and this has just been reported recently from the CSU Chancellor's Office. My understanding is that there were 93,000 total transfer applicants to the CSU in the fall 2012 cycle. Of those, more than 10,000 initially indicated that they are pursuing an associate degree for transfer. When the CSU, however, matched the community college that those students were transferring from and the degrees that have been approved, associate degrees for transfer, they were able to whittle that list down to the, what did I say, 2,300, who they have more confidence may actually be on the associate degree for transfer pathway, because the others said they were pursuing it, but the degree doesn't exist in their area at their college.
Member Ramos, followed by Member McDougall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I really want to commend you. I know this is a very difficult task. It's probably slower moving than we would like it to be. It's probably more overwhelming than we thought it would be. But I think these are good initial results that we're getting. But having said that, I do feel like the numbers we're talking about, even though we're at the outset of this process, seem remarkably low. In a system of, several million students, we may never be able to anticipate a preponderance of our students making transfer successfully to other higher institutions, higher education institutions, and maybe many don't want to. But when I look at, even the notion of 10,000 students and the figure that the chancellor gave us, which is the impressive 55,000 number that might create space for further rotation, in a system as large as ours, I wonder, can't we do better? Do we have, with that in mind, any specific goals that either the legislation instructs us to aim for, or that we should at least have in mind that in the context of the important discussion we're going to have this afternoon around student success would tell us that this is a significant traction-based strategy to achieve and demonstrate student success? Again, I don't want to be negative, but these numbers just seem remarkably infinitesimally small in comparison to the pool of students that we're serving in the system. So I don't know if you have a response to that or if the chancellor has a response to that, but I would love to know how we kind of reach a level of scale and impact that is worthy of the aims of the legislation.
Chancellor.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of students will transfer to the CSU not through this process. They'll use, the old process. That is, I think last year was about 56,000 transfers. And as you say, we'd like to see more transfers to CSU. Of course, they transfer to other institutions as well. Yes, the Student Success Task Force, one of the things that is recommended is that every college have a student success scorecard. And this scorecard will include quite a number of metrics, but one of the metrics will be how many students from this particular campus transfer. And that's easily, we can get that number very easily because we have the kind of data system that does that. So we'd like to see that transfer number increased, and we believe that this process is going to be a giant step in that direction. It's not the only pathway to transfer. There's, the old pathway that occurred, and so I'm assuming that maybe next year there will be something like 55,000 or so students from the community college that will go. In fact, 55% of all graduates from CSU began in the community college. But I'm not, I simply use this as a means of explaining, but not as an excuse, because it's our intention to see that the number of transfers go up markedly. We feel that 1440 is one path, and we feel that some of the other things that we're looking at in terms of student success, and we'll go into that in more detail this afternoon when we discuss student success, but everything from better student advisement to ways in which student will, after a year's study, will indicate what their program of study is. All of those things indicate that this will be helpful in terms of increasing the number of transfers. Now, all of us know that a lot of students who attend the community college don't intend to transfer. Some are there for certificate programs, some are there for job enrichment, and they're only there to take a course or two. But what we are concerned about is when a student says, I want to transfer, and somewhere along the line, they don't transfer. And If they successfully went into a certificate program or something else, fine. But if it means failure on their part, we're sorry for that. And that's, there are a lot of steps that we could take to do it, but we will be discussing this afternoon why we believe some of the recommendations of the Student Success Task Force are going to be helpful in increasing the number of transfers from California community colleges.
Member Ramos, do you have any?
Just one more thought, and I don't think it's inconsistent with anything that we're all saying, but I would feel that we would all be well-served to work with our colleagues at CSU and with the principal legislators and ultimately the governor's office that have seen this legislation through, to have some kind of a goal-setting mechanism that would be aspirational but ambitious, that would be numerical and quantifiable, that would tell us over a 5 or 10-year period, these are the kinds of numbers we would like to see over and above what we've experienced historically, not just relative to this pool of transfers, but to the more traditional pool that the chancellor has spoken to. I think if we lift everyone's sights, create an ambitious set of incentives around which they can galvanize on a statewide level, rather than just depending on each of the individual institutions and districts to do the best they can, we will achieve an outcome that will be more worthy of the legislative intent and our interest in promoting student transfer.
Vice Chancellor Russell, do you?
Just a second, and I might add that Senator Padilla, who authored the bill, is carefully watching what's happening and is prepared, if necessary, to take some other steps in legislation to speed this process along.
Quickly,
And
Vice
we
Chancellor.
did an attempt to kind of move quickly. We kind of passed over some things. There is an intersegmental group that is overseeing this process, and one of the agenda items is specifically that, is setting future goals, both at the CSU level and the community college level. And so we have been working internally here to establish, now that this report was 12 months, we wanted to make sure everybody was compliant. Now that we've done that, how do we step forward to make sure that there is broad adoption? And what are we accepting as the number in 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months? The Complete College America project does have a goal attached to it, so we're using that in some ways as our goal, but you've hit the nail on the head as far as what this intersegmental group is kind of tackling right now, is establishing what are we going to be happy with in 6 months and another year.
Okay. Last comment, Member McDougall, and we need to move on.
Yeah, and I'll try to be quick. I have questions in 3 areas, but I would like to say right at the beginning that I think all of us were tremendously pleased when Chancellor Reed and Chancellor Scott showed the leadership that they did, that we're going to make transfer easier for our students, clearer, not confusing. And I think as questions arise among us, if anything, it's a sense of frustration from the promise and the reality that we would like to see. And I recognize progress is being made. But I have 3 areas of questions. One, it seems that fundamental is, what are the spaces that are available for community college transfers, number one? Because if that is getting reduced, that creates big problems. Second, is there clarity on the process by which these degrees get confused? And third is a question of whether we feel there is an understanding among students of what is taking place, or confusion at this point. From the figures of 10,000, assuming they were in a transfer curriculum, versus 2,300 that apparently were in one, it seems as though confusion might be reigning, at least to some degree. But first of all, on the receptivity and the space available for community college transfers, given the respective roles of UC, CSU, and the responsibility of community college for lower division education, there was a 75-25 ratio, lower division to upper division, that was to exist for the CSU, recognizing that the bulk of lower division education would take place in community colleges, and therefore their enrollment would be top-heavy with juniors and seniors. So my question is that presently a policy in effect, and are those numbers approximately what they should be? Let me just ask the other questions, and I think it'd be easier to respond. The second is the clarity on the process by which transfer degrees are developed by individual colleges. If I understood it correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the authority for determining the lower division completion has been delegated to the State Academic Senate of the California Community Colleges to determine what that might be. And obviously, they're trying to do it in a collegial way and get as much approval as possible with the CSU counterparts. But the authority is vested in our Academic Senate. Once the Academic Senate approves a degree, let's say in a discipline such as English or history, whatever it may be, the individual college must thus demonstrate how their courses fit the model degree, if you will, that the Academic Senate has determined. That's my understanding right now. If that's a wrong understanding, I'd like to have it corrected. And the third and last question or point is, do you feel on our campuses that there is a general sense among our counseling staff, among our faculty, and perhaps most importantly, among our students, that what the system is and how the system works? So those are three.
I'll take 1 and 3, and then let Barry talk about your middle question. On the space available at the CSU, the CSU has maintained always that they do retain at least the 40-60 ratio of lower division to upper division students. In my view, that does not necessarily mean that there is space available for all of the students who wish to pursue the baccalaureate degree at the CSU, and certainly not for all the transfer students who are qualified to do that. So I think that the one thing I like particularly about Member Ramos's suggestion is that the state needs to understand that this can only work as well as there is funding to enroll the students who successfully complete this process. So I do think that attention needs to be paid there. 2 years ago, our transfer numbers to CSU fell dramatically because the CSU took a mid-year budget cut. And their response was to shut down spring admissions. And virtually all spring admissions are community college transfer students. So we went from 54,000 to 35,000 in a single year. And now we're back in the 55, 56,000 range. But the state's commitment and funding for the systems has a major role to play. Otherwise, we're only dealing with who gets to transfer, and we are making the system more efficient so that we can accommodate more students with the same amount of money, but accommodating demand is another issue. On the question about clarity, I would say that right now, no, there is not clarity about this process, either among our counselors or the students. We're working actively with counseling faculty to develop some counseling tools so that our faculty can work actively with students to determine what their best pathway is. You know, as I was trying to, in very few words, describe the GPA benefit for students who are going into an impacted campus or major, it's complex. A student who is a marginal student with a 2.0 may not be best served by trying to transfer to Long Beach State or San Diego State. And so for the counseling faculty to understand what's current in their local environment and what the other options are for students, it's not simple, it's somewhat complicated, and we're actively working now to develop those tools with the counseling faculty. There's has been some resistance among some of our articulation officers in particular to the idea of the degrees with that include the 18 units in a major or area of emphasis. It's a long-standing debate that predates that requirement being part of all of our associate degrees, and it's kind of been revived in the process of implementing SB 1440, because they, in many cases, the community college has a strong relationship with their local CSU, and they've defined a minimal pathway for students to make that transition, and they don't necessarily understand the importance of approaching this in a way that is more statewide, so that students don't have to know those pathways for every single campus, but they have a, something that works at all of the CSUs. So it's been challenging, but I think that we are making progress, and that's, we're using a lot of our attention right now on making sure that that clarity is there. And through the marketing materials, in some ways, making the message very simple, I think will drive forward all of the progress, because students are coming with an expectation that they can get an associate degree that contains a guarantee to transfer to the CSU. And all of the pieces are being compelled to respond to that and to make sure that that is a reality.
Vice Chancellor, quickly, we need to move on.
Yes. The TMC development process by the Senate is all about those 18 units, because the degree is basically completing the GE package plus the 18 units, and the 18 units in a major. So while it is clear, it's not prescriptive what those 18 units are. They provide some options. Most of the TMCs go something like choose these 2 courses and 3 from this list and 2 more from this following list, so that the campuses, and this is not the students making the choice, these are the campuses making choices from their arsenal of courses that fit this statewide TMC model to come up with their 18 units. Because what has been agreed upon statewide is that any collection of those courses developed by the local campuses would prepare a student for, would provide the undergraduate preparation for that degree at the state level. And both the CSU and the community college faculty have signed off that that is indeed a good preparation. So they do have lots of choices within those 18 units from basically their arsenal of credits, but obviously not all of the courses at the community college are necessarily fit those degrees. So those would be restricted and would not be allowed within the 18 units because they don't follow, they don't fit into the TMC model.
President Himmelstein, I know we have to move along, and I respect that, but I would appreciate it if we could have maybe 2 meetings from now, another discussion on this topic. This is one of the 3 legs of the community college's mission.
Absolutely.
And our students are depending upon our staff and us for clarity, for understanding of how to make this effective. I think we, as a board, have to be very confident that we're doing all we can. So I would request that perhaps at a couple of meetings, we bring this back to get an update on it.
I would agree with you, and I'd ask the Chancellor and staff to agendize that per Member McDougall's request. I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you all very much. Appreciate all the hard work. We're going to